What's up, YouTube? Today we are going to be going over why Nvidia may be the new leader in the chip war as far as architecture is concerned, and why Intel x86 architecture may be going down the drain. Let's talk about that. Okay, welcome to the very first stream that I've done in a long time. I had to redo the stream before, but I am really excited about this. This is basically live, so this is forcing me to go ahead and get this done. We're going to be talking about something that I think is a pretty big deal, and I don't think everybody sees it yet. And I just want to kind of go over a brief history of things and kind of go where it's very interesting to see where the whole entire PC market may end up going, and that includes on gaming as well. So let's start here with some things that I think may end up happening, and where things may end up taking its time to change over. So let's first talk about why Nvidia, of all companies, is really it's going to be a shift between Intel and Nvidia, and I think they're both going to reverse their roles on what they do and literally do one does the other. And how I mean that is Nvidia was in the news in October or September. It's either September or October, and basically they announced that they were purchasing ARM, which is a very, very big deal. And that is a big deal because a lot of things are now running on the ARM architecture, even more than what they've been. ARM is really a very, very cool architecture that is pretty much most of your phones, everybody's phones that they're running is running on the ARM architecture. And it is a big deal. And that is really, really cool because these mobile devices are starting to get more powerful. And they're not on the architecture of x86. Intel just couldn't hit the mobile device category that they used to. They tried. They tried. I think they tried powering it with a mobile processor. I think the Atom processor was one they ended up trying to make more of a mobile chip, but that just didn't work. The architecture just doesn't scale out really well for smaller, very small portable devices, and the performance per watt, which is a thing that you'll hear often, just isn't there. So in other words, if you can get more performance per watt off of these, that means that you can do a lot more and not have as much power needed for them. So that's why Apple chips and Android Snapdragon processors are all running on the ARM architecture in one way or the other. Apple happens to license out the architecture and they make some modifications, but it is running on that architecture. So one big thing that happened, obviously, this year, and I'm going to switch over to my desktop, and we'll shrink that down there, is that basically Apple, as they being Apple, has made the switch over from their Intel processors over to what they call the M1 chip. And the M1 chip is a pretty big deal because from a single core performance and even a multi-threaded performance, these chips are really, really good in terms of their performance per watt. And they really, really, really do a very good job in rendering, exporting, launching single applications. If you don't even need to be a tech person to understand when you go on a Mac and you hit every icon that's on the bottom on the dock and you see that it starts up instantly, you know that the chip is very, very quick at, in this case, single-threaded performances. But even with people running anything from video editing to music production, have noticed that these chips, they perform very, very well. And what's interesting more about that is that they also perform well with very little memory. And that's an interesting thing as well. But the point here is that Apple has made this changeover from Intel to the new platform, which they're using the ARM architecture, which, funny enough, they got rid of the Nvidia graphics. They always had an issue with Nvidia. Nvidia has purchased ARM or at least they are going to purchase ARM. I'm not exactly sure if they 100% own them, but I know that the company basically is going to go to Nvidia, and they're the company that owns ARM, which is a British company. Not exactly sure what British company owns them. I think I'm looking it up right now. So right now, ARM Holdings, which was owned by a British company, they ended up buying them. I know it got sold and transferred quite a bit, but it uses RISC, which is it's very amazing that this thing actually these mobile processors they've been around for a while though. Don't get me wrong, they've been around, but they seem to be outperforming x86. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, a vast majority of the users use Windows-based machines. Not everybody uses Macintosh computers, but I knew when Apple went on board with just using their own proprietary chips that they modified from the ARM architecture, I knew that the market was in for a shock, and because people are finding that these things work really, really well. Having said that, I believe that we're going to start seeing more computers run the ARM architecture as opposed to running x86. Now, don't get me wrong, Windows on ARM, as you can see here, has been around for quite some time, and they have been using it, and they've been developing for it. But here's the difference. In the past, Windows RT, for example, which the Surface RT ran a 32-bit based ARM chip, but the problem was that you couldn't emulate x86 applications. In other words, you couldn't run an application that was developed for a traditional Windows computer. So with the Windows computer that you have, literally, you couldn't run the application. So you had these devices back in 2012 that ran Windows 8, but it just couldn't run. They built an application, they built Microsoft Word, and they built Edge. And those were the two, Microsoft Office and Edge, those were literally the two applications that were available. And then there was some universal Windows apps, which kind of, it just didn't work. Now, the difference here, though, is that with Apple, they are really good at emulation. And Apple has Rosetta 2. And if we look up Rosetta 2, it is really, really, really cool. Because with Rosetta 2, it will be able to run applications that basically it actually runs them better in emulation than it does on like Intel-based Macs. It's very interesting to see that. So with Rosetta 2, it will make the ARM transition much easier. Now, why am I saying this? Why am I going to this tangent of Apple when I'm talking about Nvidia and ARM? And obviously, the chips that Apple choose are the ARM architecture. Well, here's the deal. Microsoft now is emulating very well at this point, a little bit better than what it used to. x64 emulation, or also known as x86 emulation, for Windows computers. So in other words, they are starting the process of having better emulation on their machines that can, in other words, any computer that runs Windows on ARM will now be able to run and emulate x86 apps a lot better, making it, and 64-bit emulation as well, which so does Rosetta, but making it a lot easier for this transition. So, here's another news article. Microsoft is redesigning their Surface PCs to include ARM-based chips, which they kind of did with the Surface Pro X. Now they're considering, here's another shot in the shot for Intel for servers. Now that is very scary. So here's the thing. Servers have always used, for the most part, Intel-based processors. AMD didn't really do well in the server space, even though they're x86. They used Intel servers. The Xeon servers were huge. But now, Microsoft is reportedly designing their own ARM-based chips, and for their Surface PCs. So now you've got the server space, which Microsoft is very much familiar with, that they're going to run on chips specifically for that, and now you also have the consumer space. If I was Intel, I'd be very, very scared. But here's another thing that is funny to me. Intel, the thing about Intel is they're starting to develop their own GPUs. So what's funny to me is that they're developing their own GPUs, and now Intel will be producing more graphics cards. So maybe they're saving grace. Maybe Intel's saving grace will be the graphics cards in the end, because the biggest thing, again, the biggest phrase to use here is performance per watt, and that performance per watt is a pretty big deal. And that is why the industry is starting to change over to a different chip. That is the point. So that's what I mean by Nvidia is going to start to eventually become the Intel industry, because they now own ARM. So that's my thought on this. And let me switch over back to the video here. So yeah, so it's an interesting flip. And for those of you who are in this industry, I'd like to know what you think, or work in this industry. Do you think that it's going to change? Do you think that, or are we going to stick with the x86 stuff for a while? I don't think so. I think that eventually we're going to be on these quote unquote mobile processors, but because the architecture is strong enough and now is getting more and more powerful, we're going to switch over to that. I can see that on Windows-based machines. I can see that on servers as well. Here's another thing that I can also see before wrapping up this video, and I do appreciate those who are watching. And if you have any comments for those who are watching, just put them in the comment section. I'm not right about everything by any stretch of the imagination, so if I got anything wrong, please let me know in the comments, and I will definitely address that for everyone, just so that way we can talk. But the point is, it's a shift, and it's going to be interesting. I'm excited, personally. So if you guys have any thoughts, or girls have any thoughts whatsoever to how the industry may change, or am I wrong? I don't think this is going to change overnight by any stretch of the imagination at all. In fact, this is probably going to be, I'm guessing, 5 to 10 years of a shift. But if I was investing, which I am, I would think about investing in Nvidia. I would think about that. And possibly even Intel, because Intel may end up coming back and becoming a player in the graphics space. They are working really, really hard now to be, believe it or not, a graphics card provider. And there's nothing out yet, but I know they are currently working on that. They got to work on something, because x86 architecture is really, really kind of seeing its days. And we'll see how this shift over is. But I guess my point is that Apple, they're not one to change with they're one to watch the industry, and they're one to go for something when they think that it's appropriate to do so. They were using Intel for the longest time, and they just basically, they're like, nah, we've had enough of Intel, because it's not working. They're not improving themselves. So Intel, let's see how this goes. I'm really excited to see what happens. But anyways, for those who have watched, and the 2 viewers that are currently watching right now, I do appreciate you. I'm really excited to get this YouTube channel back to a good start, and structure my thoughts a little bit better, but I just figured I wanted to do another update video. So as far as graphics cards and gaming is concerned, I think we have some time, but I think it'll be an interesting change over. So thank you guys very much for watching.